What's happening, fishing friends? My name is Devon from Debo's Fishing, and today we're talking about 5 bank fishing tips for the cold weather. Now, that's going to depend on where you're at. Folks north of me have already gotten a few inches of snow. Folks in the south are still catching bass. You know, they might still be on some good certain bites. And then there's kind of everything in between. But these are 5 things that have helped me throughout the years to be more successful fishing from the bank. So the first tip is get out of your comfort zone. Now, you know, cold fishing, whether it's late fall, early winter, wherever you're at, depending on the weather and water temps, it can be a tough time, right? We've already gone through turnover. We've already gone through most of that fall fishing where the bait are really piled up. You know, the bass are schooling and actively chasing. You see all that action. Then we have a bunch of different cold temp drops, right? And the temperature consistently goes down. So you might be a power fisherman by nature, or on the other side of things, you might be a finesse fisherman, but you know, quicker stuff. You're used to working the lure quicker, faster. If you're regularly a power fisherman, you're looking to cover water, move fast as you can, you might be able to use that in some places, but in a lot of spots, you're going to have to slow down. You know, the spots where you still find a few fish stacked up and really work that. Same thing for finesse anglers. You know, a lot of people will say when it gets cold, just downsize, just go finesse. And a lot of finesse anglers go, well, I'm still not catching fish, right? Well, it might be because you're going too fast. So this is kind of a two-pronged approach. For those power anglers out there, you like to throw big spinner baits, you know, you like to crank fast, burn stuff. It might be time to slow down. Again, depends on where you're at in the nation, but around here for me in the Midwest, it's often time to slow down. You know, maybe instead of burning that lipless like you were earlier in the fall and fish were just hammering it, maybe you yo-yo it. You know, a lot of guys are even, you know, bouncing those off the bottom, almost jigging it off the bottom, slow rolling that spinnerbait. So you cast it out and instead of burning it and twitching it a bunch, you're letting it flutter all the way to the bottom. Sometimes you'll get bites then, letting it flutter all the way down to the bottom, feeling the bottom and slow rolling that spinnerbait. Same thing with a paddle tail swim bait. Cast it out, let it hit bottom. Make sure you're feeling all those hits and just slow winding it. I was out recently, I was trying a few different things, and my buddy Nick Rundle crushed me. He had like 7 or 8 fish. He outfished me. I think I only caught 1. He was just slow rolling a spinnerbait or a swim bait all day. So not that you can't use a lot of those power techniques, or not that you can't use some of those finesse techniques, you know, like a Ned rig or a wacky rig, drop shot. Some of those will definitely still work, but a lot of times you've got to slow down and really focus on those piles of fish, because when you find one, there's generally going to be a few in that area. You know, when I'm fishing here around a lot of fishing jetties, I don't want to just catch one and then book it and get out of there. If I catch one there, there's a good chance there's going to be other fish. It's almost as if I did that on purpose, because I did. Number 2 is slowing down and being thorough in the area where you find fish. Now, why is that? Well, there's a few things that drive bass behavior. Of course, weather, temperature, you know, seasonal patterns. But as we get past now, you know, there's no spawn, there's none of that stuff. But we are getting down into those colder winter months where a lot of bass will be moving out deeper to their, you hear it a lot, their winter haunts, you know, deep water. But what if the pond you're fishing is max 6 foot deep? Or I'm fishing man-made lakes like I've got around here where I think it's like 12 or 10 feet deep on the dam side. Well, the thing about winter and water's cooling down is not that fish shut off. It's not that they don't eat at all. Fish do continue to eat. Even here in Iowa, when I'm fishing through the ice fishing, fish are still eating. Now, their metabolism isn't as high. They're not doing as much, so they don't have to eat as much, but they will still eat. So the thing is, when you get in, you know, the body of water that you're fishing, when you get in a spot that you find fish, really be thorough there. So, for example, we've got, you know, a bunch of rocky fishing jetties you'll see me fishing on. If I find one fishing jetty that I start catching fish on it, and I notice a pattern that it's only jetties that face this way, or it's only jetties that have this type of rock, try to really focus on that, because fish need to eat, they need prey, and they need to feel safe and comfortable to attack that prey wherever they're living. Those are 2 big things you can always think about when you're pond hopping or, you know, going to different lakes. Do they feel safe, and do they have stuff there to eat? Because a lot of times if they don't have that, they're not going to be there, right? Now, unless they're, you know, chasing, schooling, there's always, you know, exceptions to that, but that's a good thing to go by. So when you find a fish on a jetty, or if you find fish on, like, you know, sunken timber or wood, you know, rocks are going to hold heat and warm up. Same thing with like metal, docks. Those will hold heat longer than other, you know, places for the fish to hide. So really focus on those spots. Another thing to think about is trying different things in that spot. So I'm a big proponent of taking, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 combos when you go. Nothing wrong with taking just one combo and going out, but sometimes for me, I found that it really limited me. So like, for example, I love to frog fish. If I go out with just a frog in my hand, I'm having fun the whole time fishing. I might only get certain bites, but I'm having fun. Now, if you could look at that from a different point of view and take 2 or 3, 4 different combos with you, in that spot where you catch a couple on the jig, maybe you go out a little bit deeper with a drop shot or something. You know, vegetation where you couldn't get there with the jig, it was bringing up slime, but you throw a drop shot with a couple foot leader, maybe you're catching fish that you couldn't have. Or, you know, let's say I'm throwing a big spinnerbait with a lot of flash and I catch a couple that way, but I downsize to a little, you know, 3-inch Kitech or something on a jig head, and I picked 2, 3, 4 more up. I would say don't be afraid to switch up presentations, switch up lures in those spots where you've caught fish or historically caught fish at the same time of year, and find a little bit more time there and be thorough. Okay, so we kind of touched on this in number 2, but number 3 is finding patterns in your lake, in your area. You know, I've talked to a lot of bank anglers who say, I'm not a pro. I don't have an $80,000 boat. I don't listen to these chumps when, you know, when they're talking about, oh, I'm using my live scope and I'm in 30 feet of water. I saw the fish come up. Great. I'm a bank angler. Well, the thing is, you can still take a lot of the things that they're doing, these pros or anybody that you watch or trust or listen to, you can still take a lot of what they're doing and apply it to your area where you fish. Like I said before, you know, you might be watching pros at Sam Rayburn or Lake Fork or Chickamauga someplace, and they're fishing deep, or they're fishing, you know, really thick grassy stuff, things that you don't have in your area. So you have to keep in mind that you want to find patterns in the spots that you fish. You know, like I touched on earlier, the pond you fish might only be 6 foot deep, max. Still could be 10 acres, 5 acres, 3 acres, whatever, doesn't matter. It still could be man-made and completely different from what you're seeing other people fish. So if you use the first 2 tips, you're not afraid to get out of your comfort zone, you're looking for fish, and once you find fish, you're slowing down and being thorough. I guarantee you will have more success in the places that you're fishing, you know, your local pond or lake, once you really find and identify that pattern. So if your place doesn't have wood, it has to have some sort of cover. It could be humps, you know, in the middle of the pond that you don't necessarily see. There's no visual cover, but, you know, you're dragging that swim bait and, oh, you feel it coming up over a hump or something, then boom, back down. It could be humps like that. It could be divots, or, you know, like a little hole or crater where everything else is 5 foot deep, 5 foot deep. And you've got a big hole that's like 3 or 4 foot deep. Bass will sit down in that and ambush prey. So it might not always be visible. Maybe the place you have has a lot of docks. You get a couple bites on a dock, then, you know, you walk the rest of the pond and don't get any bites. Don't be afraid to come back to that. That's a pattern for you, right? You found more than one fish there. I always say 1 fish is luck, 2 fish is a pattern. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. And I can't tell you how long to stay in a place. Let's say you catch 3 fish. Should you spend an hour there? Should you spend another 30 minutes there? I can't tell you. That's kind of up to you. Oftentimes, I look at what success I've had there in the past at the same time of year, if the conditions are true. Otherwise, I just say, you know what? I've caught 5 fish here. I'm going to try a few different things, kind of like I talked about the other one. So there's not a magic recipe, but I can tell you if you put all 3 of those together, don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone. Be thorough and slow down. You will find more patterns in your lake. And kind of my other point to that is, if you're like me, you don't have a lot of time to fish, really focus on those high percentage areas, those spots that you've determined to be a high percentage, you know, with some sort of pattern there, and focus on those. Skip the stuff in between. I know sometimes it can be really tempting, like, man, every time I come past this point, it looks so good, and the 12 years you fished it, you've never caught a single fish there. It might be time to skip it. Okay, tip 4 is explore new areas when the weather gets colder. So the thing about early spring fishing and late fall and kind of into that winter fishing is the vegetation's dying down. Weeds, trees, all the gross stuff as a bank angler that we kind of love and hate because, one, it gives cover, you know, in certain spots, and it makes the spot hard to fish, so not as many people there. But 2, if I want to go fish it, it's like trekking through the Congo. So here's the way I look at it. Go explore those new places that you can finally get to in the cold weather. Maybe they're somewhat easy, maybe they're not. And if they're places that were really, really hard to get to, chances are they're a little bit more of a walk. They're just really thick. Chances are there wasn't a bunch of people there through the summer, you know, just beating the snot out of it like every other guy you see walking down the easy lake that's right next to the road, right? Don't be afraid to walk a little farther. Don't be afraid to get off the beaten path. Be safe. And don't be afraid to fish those places where other people aren't, you know, those places that are a little bit harder to get to, especially when the vegetation and stuff is up really thick because, like I said, if it was hard to get to then and it's easy to get to now, it might not be as hit and pressured. Now, I'll even expand on that a little bit. I know this is Monster Bass, right? The Monster Bass channel, but I would say once you explore those new places, don't be afraid to expand into other species. You know, there's a lot of crappie guys that do extremely well this time of year, right? The bass bite kind of slows down. You can load up, you know, the bucket with crappie if you're a catch and keep angler. Pike, I absolutely love pike fishing. Next to bass fishing, it's probably my favorite. Pike love the cold water like right now. You can smash those on, spinnerbaits, a lot of the same tackle you catch on bass on, chatterbait, whatever. Places where you have perch, spotted bass, some of those fish that like the colder water, a little bit more active in that colder water. You can even try going to streams. Rivers and streams don't freeze up. Those fish are a little bit different than like a man-made lake or pond. They're completely different. I don't think get as affected or impacted as much, when there's kind of some temperature changes. So don't be afraid to go hit those. So that's what I would say. If you're struggling in your local pond, everybody's fishing it, I would say go find some places that are harder to get to and don't be afraid to branch out. Okay, tip number 5. I know a lot of people take this for granted, but carry extra clothes and dress appropriately for the cold. Unfortunately, I've done it more times than I can count. I've fallen in cold water, cold weather. I always carry an extra pair of clothes with me. I don't care what people say. Randy laughs at me, my buddy laughs at me for carrying extra clothes, but I've slipped and fallen in. It might only be up to the knee, but in cold weather like this, when it's 32 degrees out and you get wet all the way up to your knee, you're probably not going to die of hypothermia. You could get in the car and go home. But if you try to fish it out, it's just going to be miserable. So wear warm clothing, wear layers. The thing with that is wear polyester or like a wool sublayer and then layer over it. That way, if you get hot, you can take it off in layers. I'm a big proponent of like wind, like coat or wind bibs, because a lot of times you might wear a couple sweatshirts and go out and be like, oh, I'm completely fine. I'm sweating in the truck. But once you get out there and there's a little bit of wind, it will cut right through that and it makes it miserable. So have some sort of shell over that that's like a windproof wind jacket, something like that that stops that wind from getting in. I know it sounds stupid, but it will make the day that much more enjoyable when you're not freezing your strawberries off. And a big thing for me, I didn't know how much I would love them, but a pair of rubber waterproof knee boots. This time of year, it's perfect in case you get your lure snagged or if there's a spot you want to kind of walk out into. I would say 95% of anglers that I see don't ever have boots on, right? They're never prepared with anything like that, just walk around with shoes on. So if you've got rubber boots and you can actually get out to those places, to get a lure, or, if there's a little bit of flooding in a spot, you don't have to worry about that. You can just keep going on. So the reason I bring this up is because you can be more efficient. You might only have a couple hours out there. You might as well be comfortable and instead of, freezing your cookies off and being, oh, I wish I would have worn this. I thought it was going to be warmer. All right, folks, comment below and let me know which one of these tips you've used to be more successful in the cold water. Or if you have a different tip, comment below and let other people know. I love when other people are, commenting and I see multiple people talking back and forth, helping people out. I don't know everything. So there's always somebody out there that can leave a tip. Listen and learn from everyone. That's the cool part about fishing is you're never done learning. So that's enough for me. My name is Devon from Devon's Fishing, coming to you on the Monster Bass channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time,